I'm going to tell you a story about how I spent my 22nd birthday, which, like lots of people turning 22, I made a series of really terrible decisions. But instead of ending up with a hangover, I ended up lost alone in India, specifically in Delhi, which is maybe not a garden spot. So this happened in July of 2005, July 11th, a birthday I share with E.B. White and Christy Yamaguchi. And my friend Miranda and I, after graduating from college, had bought round-the-world plane tickets, which were sort of alarmingly cheap because they were on really terrible airlines. And so over the course of 2 months, I went from Boston to Reykjavik to Rome to Paris to Mumbai to Delhi to Bangkok to Taipei to LA to Boston. And a whole month of this was spent in India with Miranda. We started in Mumbai, and my boyfriend at the time was doing research in a town in the Himalayan foothills called Dharamsala, which is where the Dalai Lama lives in exile. So I left Miranda in Mumbai for a couple days, went and visited my boyfriend, and our plan was that we would meet at a hotel in Delhi that we'd picked out of our sort of budget guidebook that was maybe 2 years out of date. So this being 2005, our phones didn't work internationally. We had no way to get in touch. We were just going to meet at this hotel. So I had a great time in Dharamsala, and then at about 6 in the evening, I boarded my overnight bus to Delhi. I don't know if you've spent much time on buses in India, but it's a pretty special experience, especially in the mountains. The roads are very up and down, they're very windy. At one point, the driver decided the bus was too heavy, and so he stopped before going up a switchback, and we all had to sort of scramble up the mountain. Everyone had to get off, scramble up the mountain, and then he kind of roared around the corner. We all got back on the bus. Or I also remember looking out the window and looking down a cliff, and there was a bus that looked just like ours, except it was upside down and had clearly been on fire for a long time. And then there are elephants wandering around, there are monkeys sitting in the middle of the road, there are cows and dogs and human chaos. And meanwhile, in the bus, there are Bollywood movies playing at full blast through the night, which is typical. And what was also typical, and this is disgusting, but I'm going to tell you anyway, there was a family in the back of the bus who packed a giant spicy picnic dinner. In the first hour, they ate it. The second hour, they threw it up. And for the next 10 hours, as we went up and down and side to side, it just along the floor of the bus. So I'd been riding for 12 hours, curled into a ball around my little pack. By the time we got to Delhi, I was not particularly well rested. So we arrived, and it was about 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and there was a line of auto rickshaws waiting to pick up passengers. And if you've ever been in these, they're sort of little yellow and green pods with 3 wheels, and there's no meter like in a taxi. You have to negotiate with the driver. And if there's one thing in life that I utterly despise, it is bargaining. I'm terrible at it. I blush. I just don't care. But I know it's insulting not to do it, so I try. And I've been laughed at by so many people around the world. So I went and I approached the driver who looked the nicest, because I think I have nice dar. And I told him where I wanted to go, the name of the hotel, and he said, "Madam, I'm really sorry, but there's rioting in the city." And this is sort of the classic jumping off point for negotiations in India. And it's really quite clever, because it gives the driver a good baseline of how gullible this particular tourist is. But I'd been in India for like 5 days. I knew what was up. And I was like, I don't think anyone's rioting at 6:30 in the morning. And he said, "No, the whole city's on fire." And I sort of smirked, and we like looked up at the perfectly blue sky and the chirping birds, and he said, with his air of sort of leveling with me, "Madam, that hotel's been turned into a school." And I was just having none of this. I was like, "Oh, just take me there." And he's sort of like, "It's your funeral, madam, fine." So we get in the rickshaw, and we sort of careen through Delhi, and there are cows and dogs and human chaos, and come to this roundabout. And on one side of the roundabout is this very handsome school. And he says, like, "I told you." And I was like, well, it's a school. I don't know if that's used to be a hotel. This could just be another ploy to take me to your cousin's hotel where it's safe and there's no rioting. And so in retrospect, this is the moment when I should have said, take me to the Hyatt. But instead, and I had, my college credit card for emergencies, and this was sort of becoming an emergency. And instead what I said was, leave me here. And so, sort of reluctantly, he just kind of let me out onto this sidewalk in Delhi, and I had this huge duffel bag. And Miranda and I eventually were going trekking in the far north in the sort of Himalayas proper. And so I had this slab of a backpack, and I looked like I was building Stonehenge or something, carrying it around. And so I sort of waddled down a couple of streets and made a few turns at random and then sort of gave up. And I just put all my stuff down, I sat on it, and just waited for something to happen. And since this was India, it took about 15 seconds for something to happen, which was that this boy, who's maybe 12 or 13, sort of materialized out of nowhere, and he was wearing jeans with a crease down the front, very pressed. He had on a little green polo shirt. And he said, "Madam, do you need help?" I said, "No, I'm just lost." And he said, "Well, I work for a travel agent. If you come with me, you can have breakfast and chai, and we'll help you." I said, "Do you have internet?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." And so I went with him, and we wound up in this little tiny, narrow cinder block office where you could touch both walls, standing in the middle. And there's sort of posters of Paris or tropical beaches kind of haphazardly taped up, and the travel agent was delighted to see me, just the world's most hapless person walking in. So he sent the boy out to get me toast and tea, and he let me check my email, and I sort of told him the whole story, and he said, "Oh, what was the hotel?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, that got turned into a school." I was like, I know. And so no email from Miranda, no idea where she is. She's somewhere in Delhi. She had just flown in from Mumbai that morning. And so he sort of goes and thinks it over, and he says, "Madam, I have the solution to your problem," which is great news because somebody had to solve this problem for me. And he said, "You need to go on a houseboat in Kashmir," which was really not what I was expecting him to say. And I said, "Well, I actually really need to find my friend. I can't really go on solo vacay in a war zone." And he said, "No, it's very beautiful. It's very, very safe." I'm sure it's very beautiful. At this particular moment in time, it was not very safe, and there'd been sort of a string of bombings in Srinagar, and I said, "Well, that's great, but that doesn't seem very practical, and I need to find my friend." And he was like, "Forget your friend, Kashmir." So we spent a really lovely hour and a half talking about this, and he brought out a binder with all these laminated photos of houseboats. I was like, didn't know what to do. I checked my email, still nothing. Finally, he says, "Madam, you're very tired," which was true. And he said, "I own a hotel, and it's right nearby, and you can go there and rest, and you can find your friend later." And I said, "Okay, fine. How much does it cost?" And he named some exorbitant price, and I said, "Fine." And so we walked outside together, and I sort of thought we would walk around the corner to his hotel, which he said was right nearby. And instead, there was a car waiting with some random man behind the wheel, and he sort of loaded me into the back seat with all my stuff. And right as we were about to pull away, he knocked on the window, and I cranked it down. And this was in one of these sort of India's trademark car, the Black Ambassador, sort of bulbous and cute and cool. And so I cranked down the window, and he sort of peers through, and he goes, "Later, I'll come by and we'll talk more about Kashmir." So I was, great, okay. And then, to my sort of increasing alarm, we just drove out of the city. And we drove for 45 minutes, and Delhi sort of dribbled away, and we were in open fields. And we came to an open field with a half-built house in the middle of it, kind of covered in scaffolding. And we stopped. And the driver got out, and I got all my stuff in my backpack, and we walked to the front door, and the driver pushed it open. I don't know what I was expecting to see, but maybe like a reception desk or something. But what I saw was a barefoot young man sitting on the floor chopping up cabbages with a machete. And it gradually became clear that I was the only person there, and I didn't get a key to the house because this young man, who I don't know what to call him other than the houseboy would let me in and out of the house. And I think I just sort of surrendered to the moment by that point, and I sort of said, okay, fine, and he showed me to a bedroom. I took a nap as the sort of air conditioning switched on and off, as the power switched on and off, and it'd be freezing and then be 10,000 degrees because it's July in India, it's hot. And then eventually I sort of left the house and found my way to a little strip of shops that was sort of half a mile away. And in India, the sort of pay international phones are called STDs for some reason. I was really excited to see an STD. And then I did the meanest thing possible, which is that I called my mother. And it was maybe 11 o'clock at night in California. By this point, it's mid-afternoon in India. And she said, "Happy birthday." And I said, "I don't know where I am, and I can't find Miranda, and I might be moving to Kashmir, and my only friend is a guy with a machete." And she said, "What?" And I sort of unpacked the story. And then she said, "Is there anything I can do?" And of course, the truthful answer was no. And all I did was ruin her night's sleep. I think she was awake all night. And I went to the local internet place, no email, powers turning on, turning off. Went back to the house, houseboy wasn't there, I sat in the dirt for a while. Went back to the internet place, finally, there's an email from Miranda, and it says, "Did you know our hotel was turned into a school?" Yes, I did. And she said, "I'm at a different hotel." She gave me the address. She said, "Come find me, we'll go to a really fancy place and have cocktails for your birthday with ice in it." And ice is like such a luxury in India, because you never know what water it's being made out of. So I ran back to the house. I got the poor houseboy. I said, "Get me a rickshaw." And I got all my stuff, and the rickshaw driver was like, "Oh, madam, there are riots." And I was just like, no. So it takes me all the way back into Delhi. Pull up to the hotel. Miranda's waiting outside. Big reunion hug. Standing there and kind of telling her the story on the sidewalk. It starts to rain because it's monsoon, it's always raining. And I noticed as the raindrops were sort of dribbling down her face, they were leaving these gritty gray trails. I kind of looked around, and right across the street, there was this weird compound behind a wall, and it was sort of brick buildings with corrugated metal roofs and all these chimneys with lots and lots of smoke. And in front, there was sort of laundry lines with white sheets and weird green sort of smocks. And I said, "What is that place? What's the smoke?" And she was like, "Oh, that's the crematorium." And I have to say that I have seldom been happier than I was at that moment with human ash running down my face, because I was safe and I found my friend, and that's one of my best birthdays ever because it was the emergency that wasn't. Thank you.